Hello everyone, this is Selena here and welcome to today's presentation, The Dangers of Candida. We have a lot to go over today, so I'm going to jump right in here. This presentation is designed for educational purposes only and is not engaged in rendering medical advice, legal advice, or professional services. If you feel that you have a medical problem, you should seek the advice of your physician or healthcare practitioner. So again, I want to welcome all of you guys. I'm so excited that you are able to join us today. Over this next hour, we're going to cover a lot of things here. We're going to talk about pretty much everything you need to know about Candida overgrowth and what you need to do to help heal your gut. Things like what is Candida, what causes Candida overgrowth, the signs and symptoms and illnesses linked to Candida, and the 5 natural steps of treating Candida. So what is Candida? Our bodies host a variety of organisms, including bacteria and funguses, in our body and on our skin. Candida is a species of yeast that's normally found in small amounts in our mouth, in our GI tract, and our skin. And when present in small amounts, our body can still thrive. However, in the right environment, yeast can multiply and grow out of control like crazy, which can lead to a condition called candiditis. And according to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, there are over 20 species of Candida yeast that can cause infections in humans. The most common, of course, is the Candida albicans. So again, there's the different types. We have the Candida infections of the mouth, the throat, and the esophagus. This is often referred to as thrush. And then we have the vaginal candiditis, and we see this primarily in women. Men can have this as well, but pretty much for the most part, we're going to see this in women. And then we have the invasive candiditis. And this is pretty much like the systemic. This is whenever it goes throughout the body and throughout the bloodstream whenever we have a really serious issue. And the most common species that we have are, like I said, the Candida Albicans. That one we're going to hear the most about because it's generally thought to be about at least 50% of the Candida problems. Then the Candida Glabrata, Parasilosis, Crucii, and Lucinae. These are going to be the ones that we're going to talk about. Again, there's like over 20 of these that it's said to have, but let's look at the most common, Candida albicans. More than likely, if you're in the natural health or your world, or you're familiar with natural health and approaching health naturally, you've probably heard of this one. It accounts for about 50% of the overgrowth, and it's a very opportunistic in nature. And that means that if there's an opportunity for it to take over, it's going to jump on that, and it's going to wreak havoc on many parts of our body. And it thrives in environments such as a compromised immune system, low counts of beneficial bacteria, where we have like a lot of antibiotic use or really high stress levels, excessive sugar intake, or hormonal imbalances. All of these things kind of work hand in hand. One of those often leads to another, especially that one there in the middle, that high stress, is generally at the core of most situations. Some of the symptoms of this particular type of Candida are fatigue, bloating, flatulence, anxiety, depression, vaginitis, itchy skin, impaired memory, poor concentration, and foggy brain. And again, these are symptoms that we see quite often throughout the health challenges. So just because we have this doesn't necessarily mean that we have Candida, but it definitely means it's something that you probably want to explore to say, hey, is Candida a problem for me? Our next one is Candida tropicalis. And this is generally thought to be the second most common. Approximately 30% of Candida bloodstream infections are thought to be this. The overgrowth of this species has also been linked to a lot of different nervous disorders and nervous symptoms, things like depression, anxiety, headaches, memory loss, all of these things that are tied to our neurotransmitters and in that whole nervous system. Individuals most susceptible to this overgrowth include those that are diabetics, leukemia, lymphomas, those who have an immune compromised body. And this type of overgrowth generally occurs in the GI tract and on the skin. Most of the symptoms surrounding this particular type is diarrhea, excessive gas, stomach cramps, that relentless itching, those eczema type rashes, and hives. And this was becoming more and more resistant to the antifungal drugs, making it one of the most difficult ones to treat, which brings about why we're looking at these things naturally so we don't create these completely resistant type bacteria. Our next one is the Candida Glabrata. According to the National Institute of Health, the mucosal and systemic infections caused by Candida Glabrata has increased significantly due to the growing use of immunosuppressive agents. Approximately 10 to 30% of Candida infections can cause oral thrush. And what happens, with that is we generally see this in babies and toddlers and older adults. Those with immune deficiencies. And, again, it goes back to these immunosuppressive agents. We keep using a lot of these immunosuppressive drugs, which then compromises our body and makes our body challenged then to fight the battle that it needs to fight. So these opportunistic type bacteria take advantage of that, and then we have this catch-22 scenario, and things really have this domino effect in a very negative way. And this is one of those that takes advantage of that. When we leave this particular kind untreated, the thrush can spread to other parts of the body, also including things like the lungs and the liver, especially in those who are immunocompromised. So that's where it's really important to put these things into context. And as we get farther on, I want you to think about this immunosuppressive and this immunocompromised state and what that translates into in a practical sense. And that when we talk about some of these different illnesses that are associated with Candida. The next one is the Candida parasilosis. This one's involved about 30% of the infections, like the nail and tissue infections, as well as the blood infections that we're going to see. So you see a lot like the nail, the tissue, the blood. You're going to have symptoms such as the severe flu-like symptoms, chronic fatigue, those systemic infections, the ones where it seems like this is just very difficult to get rid of. Again, this one is also one that has a very high resistance to antimicrobial drugs and has even become a cause of concern in the European hospitals. So this one, while it's 30% now, I have a suspicion that this one may end up growing to a much greater presence because of our overuse of antibiotics and immunosuppressant type drugs and those sort of things, which leads to some of these more rare types, such as the Candida crucei and the Candida lusteinae. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. This one, generally, these account for about 1%. They're considered relatively rare. The crucei is associated with the infant diarrhea and sometimes a systemic candiditis, where the other one is been linked to several cases of the blood infections as well as the systemic and including the sepsis and the pyelonephritis. And potentially, it's a very serious kidney infection, which again, holistically, when we look at this holistically and look at things that cause Candida and what Candida thrives on, and then some of the organs that are involved in those processes and involved in, getting rid of some of these things, this really actually makes a lot of perfect sense that it would be that our kidneys would suffer from something as this. So what causes the Candida? There are so many reasons that yeast can grow out of control in the body. So I had some different materials. If you had signed up to earlier to receive the registration link, we did send out some prep information, and one of those we talked about some of the major contributors are beer, sugar, and kombucha. And I know a lot of you are like, oh, not kombucha. We love kombucha. And yes, I love kombucha as well. But it's something that will feed the Candida. If you've got a Candida overgrowth, kombucha can do that. And so we have to look at, even though things are natural, sometimes they're really not what our body needs or not supporting health at our particular state. So a lot of these other things that are very common factors that we see associated with what the underlying things to drive the Candida and cause the Candida are high alcohol intake, an immune system that's weakened, taking oral contraceptives, diabetes, high stress levels. High stress levels is at the core of so many of our chronic health issues. And the reason for that is because, number one, it diverts blood flow away from our GI tract. So now our body doesn't have the blood flow that it needs for those GI organs to work right. Secondly, then we start having nutrition deficiencies. And then we also have the stress is going to divert some of those cofactors, these vitamins and minerals and different enzymes that are needed to promote health and healing. They're shifted into the pathways that are in that catabolic or that sympathetic fight or flight stressful mode state. So that's why the stress is so key and at the core, because if we're stuck on this overdrive, we have our car the pedal to the metal going, we can't use the brakes. We're just the engine. We can't make turns. We can't do what we need to do because we're trying to get away from this lion, whatever that particular lion or that perceived threat that our body has. Sometimes it is past trauma that our body is trying to still run away from. So the stress, I encourage you that if you have a long-term chronic illness or your child has something that's just been very long-term, to look at the big picture and really put a lot of weight into what's going on stress-wise. We'll get back to some of the foods like beer, sugar, kombucha, like I mentioned before. Antibiotics, these things really destroy our GI tract, and they just kind of come through, wreak havoc, and there's not really much that can happen after. It just takes a lot to repair that damage. And then if you have a diet high in sugar and refined carbs, our standard American diet is, the main fuel for this candida. They just love our sugary foods and really foods that really aren't really foods. But I'm just looking at this list here, and there's a common denominator, and that is poor gut health, which means we have a compromised microbiome. And that's where we have that catch-22. So some of these things, could be the initial cause, initial triggers, but a lot of times it's just a many little things that finally the straw that breaks the camel's back. And so we have a gut that's been compromised. So what can we do to influence our gut, to improve our gut health? Because that's where so many of these things that starts place. It's kind of like that's our fuel tank, that's our car. Where we put the fuel in, our gut is going to pull out the nutrients. So we've got to promote a healthy microbiome. There's over 100 trillion good bacteria in our gut that live in our bodies, and most of which those can be found in our GI tract. We also have them on our skin. We have them throughout our body. The good bacteria, sometimes it's not always just the bad bacteria that gets overgrowth. Sometimes it's the good guys gone bad. But generally speaking, we want at least a good amount of these good guys in our GI tract, 85, 90%, and about 10 to 15% of the supposed bad guys. When our balance gets out of whack, that's when things start having problems, because the bacteria that we have, like I said, that's synergistically, so they're going to help. Sometimes they're fighting the battle for us. A lot of times they're pulling out and helping us to get to the nutrients that we need. They're helping to break down our food. They're helping to get, activate our receptors. So they're getting us the fuel that our body needs to support them and to support the rest of our body, that immune system. So we really, really need these trillions of cells, which we have more DNA in our side of our bodies of bacteria than we do of our own. That's how much bacteria we have in our body. So they're going to, like I said, break down foods. And so whenever the opportunistic or some of these bad bugs, if the environment is not well, then that's when they can take over. So there's things that do thrive in a desert. Cacti thrive in a desert. My lush green grass is not going to do so well in the desert. I do live here in Texas. I'm in East Texas, where we have a lot of humidity, a lot of rain. And so it's very, very different than if I go to my friends over there in West Texas. Very, very different. So I cannot take the same things, the grass seed and the plants that I have here, and expect them to grow the same there. So that's why it's so important that we promote a healthy microbiome. So what are the things that we can do for that? These first two, sleep and stress management, are key, with stress management being the most non-negotiable. You can sometimes get away with not being perfect on these other things, but you have to have that stress management so that our body is in that restorative, that parasympathetic state, or else we're a lot of times just going to spin in circles and spend money and waste time on, things that are just not going to help us overall. The next thing is quality foods. We have to put good fuel in our bodies. We put good fuel in our cars. We would never know when we put tainted gas into our car, and especially wouldn't put it in there and expect it to run well. So the same with our bodies. We have to put in good food if we are wanting health and vitality. And if we are wanting our body to repair, we need exceptionally good food. That's where it needs to be, we need to be really good about putting good fuel in. We can't expect it to repair if we're not giving it good food to do that. The next thing is adequate hydration. I will admit that I am one of the worst when it comes to hydration. I find myself frequently that, I didn't drink enough today. I seem to be able to eat pretty good on the food side, but I just do not drink enough. And that's something I have to work on. So making sure that we have enough food and enough water for our bodies, and that it's good quality hydration. And then there's the appropriate activity. This one is often overlooked. We hit quite a bit the sedentary lifestyle, but we forget that we can be overactive. I see a lot, and we're hearing it more and more. There's quite a few studies actually been out there on athletes and their chronic GI health issues, especially when it comes to leaky gut and zonulin and these bacterial overgrowths. And again, it goes back to what I just mentioned a few minutes ago. When we are in that fight or flight mode, and it may be something that's not we're necessarily a bad thing we're running away from, we're like this really high intensity exercise puts us into that sympathetic state when it's long term. So like professional sports players really have a lot of times have to really watch and make sure that they are having downtime to get back into that restful parasympathetic state. So the activity needs to be balanced. We need a healthy amount of activity, not too much and not too little. So that's something to really look at is that if you are an athlete and you're realizing, okay, why do I have this problems? You may need to cut back a little bit, or at least put extra time and extra energy on focusing on that self-care, on that downtime. We need just as much that restful state as we do if we want to have our bodies to work at its full potential. Like we would not leave our cars running all the time in our garage. We wouldn't have them constantly going. There's downtime for our vehicles, or our engines would burn up. And so that's the same thing with our bodies. Make sure that it is appropriate. So what are some of the symptoms that we have? So if we got these things here all in place, then what are the symptoms? There are a lot of symptoms, and I'm going to share a guide with you guys towards the end because there's quite a few here that if you're suffering from Candida, if Candida is a problem, pretty much hits all spectrums, like poor focus and concentration, having different food sensitivities, like especially new ones, that white coating on the tongue, that's the one we often see like with thrush and things. We see, oh, we stick out the tongue. What does the tongue look like? Oh, it has that kind of white or sometimes like yellowish coating on the tongue. GI issues from gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, mucus, pretty much the whole gamut. And again, because once our GI tract is disrupted somewhere, there's going to be this domino effect, which can, depending on the other situations, we need to look at the whole entire picture, that we can go from either constipation or diarrhea, the whole gamut and everything in between. Persistent, intense sugar cravings. And a lot of the reasons for this is because that bacteria, remember I mentioned, works synergistically in our body. So there's different things that they're going to activate, receptors, and they're going to help support our body. So if these opportunistic ones get out of hand, guess what's going to we're going to start getting a lot of signals for this sugar. Why? Because we're eating more sugar. That craving for those processed foods, those processed carbs, breads and pasta and pastries and things like that are another big symptom of you've got an overgrowth. There's bacteria that's wanting that food. Brain fog, anxiety or depression, mood swings, irritability, chronic vaginal yeast infections, the itching, swelling, and discharges, skin issues like acne, eczema, psoriasis, itchy ears, low libido, unexplained fatigue and exhaustion. This is tied to a lot of different situations, and a lot of these kind of overflow into many other potential problems. But these are some of the symptoms of that. The canker sores and even flu-like symptoms. All of these things are something that, if we're having a lot of these, then we might want to look into say, hey, is Candida potentially something that I'm dealing with? And then we have some of the illnesses and some of these labels that we get on these different diseases, which are at the end of the equation. They're not really the problem. They're just what they've labeled as cluster of symptoms. Here's some of the things that are disassociated with, and there's studies and things that have been associated to this. So first is the oral thrush. This one's probably the most common. We all know about this. They even talk about this a lot of times even in the conventional medical world. The oral thrush is a yeast overgrowth in the mouth, and it can cause those white, bumpy lesions of redness, and it even can cause pain in the mouth and the throat. And in severe cases, it can spread into your esophagus and cause pain and difficulty swallowing there. And so those who have a weakened immune system are really susceptible to this, and it's often associated with those that have that weak immune system. That opportunistic bacteria just takes advantage of that and takes over. The next one is tiredness and fatigue, and this is another one that's among the most common for many reasons, and it goes back to those deficiencies. Things such as B6 and your essential fatty acids and magnesium are the most common deficiencies associated that accompany candiditis. And again, infections are common whenever this immune system is impaired, and then you have multiple things, and there's multiple catch-22s, and things kind of escalate from there. Recurring genital and urinary tract infections are another one of these most common situations with the Candida. And while it's primarily in women, and like 75% or so of women have experienced at least one vaginal yeast infection in their lifetime, men can also get yeast infections. But the recurring infections can often be a result of Candida overgrowth. And then we have the digestive issues. When that balance between the good guys and these bad guys is impaired, or the good guys, some of these opportunistic ones take over, we can experience a lot of different types of GI issues. You know, things such as the constipation, the diarrhea, the cramps, bloating, the things that I just mentioned. Again, excuse me. Then we also have sinus infections. These long-lasting chronic infections are often believed to be caused by different fungi. And so antibiotics are pretty much usually prescribed for these situations, but they're ineffective because it's not bacterial. And so what does it do? It ends up wiping out our microbiome. It ends up creating more of a desert type situation. And so now it creates this opportunistic scenario where these opportunistic bacteria can take advantage of that, and now we end up having problems. Skin, nail, and fungal infections is also something that's very common with Candida. Our skin has, again, there should be bacteria on our skin. That bacteria help to support our immune system to keep things out where they shouldn't be. But with all of our antibacterial craze, with all of our antibacterial soaps, you know, everywhere, and the hand sanitizers, all that kind of stuff, we are wiping out our bacteria on our skin. So our outside defense, we're killing it just like we are with the overuse of antibiotics inside. So we've got a desert on the outside, a desert on the inside, and that's where we have these chronic health situations skyrocketing. Like eczema is one of those things that's skyrocketing. I mean, it's pretty much everything. The chronic health situations are all skyrocketing because we just aren't respecting our whole body and the other things that are needed to support health and healing and vitality. Itching and a visible rash are two of the most common symptoms whenever we have these skin and nail fungal infections. And then research has also been found to have this associated with some different, you know, diseases or these different labels. Some of these may be quite surprising. The last one I touched on is usually the most surprising for many people. The first one is leaky gut, which probably you might think, well, that makes sense, right? Because the Candida in the gut and where it's at, and so that would make sense. But we have things like the ulcerative colitis and Crohn's and eczema, and then we also have things like autism. But there's even a bigger one than that, which is more of a surprise for many people. And it's something that we have known for over 100 years. And I forgot the fibromyalgia, which if you look at the symptoms of like fibromyalgia and you start looking at Candida, the different areas that it affects, a lot of this actually makes sense. But let's look at this next one here, and that is cancer. Researchers have known for over 100 years that bacterial and viral infections have caused several types of cancer. The current research is even examining the link between cancer and fungal overgrowth, and many believe there is a direct connection between Candida and cancer. In 1913, Nobel laureate Dr. Johannes Feibringer proved that a connection between cancer and fungal overgrowth. 1950, a comprehensive study published by Lankenau Hospital Research Institute and the Institute for Cancer Research, they revealed findings of fungi present in virtually all cancerous tumors they examined. That's pretty profound. 2007, Candida found in 97 to 98% of cancerous tumors in humans by Dr. Simoncini. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that one right. But this coexistence of cancer and candiditis has been well documented for so long. You think that we would know about this, but for many, this is probably the first time that you have even heard this. And I wonder how many of those who have cancer, have been diagnosed with cancer, that they were ever explored to say, hey, is there some yeast issues going on? What else is going on upstream and under the surface here? It's just very, very, very saddening to know that we have known these things for 100 years, and there's so many things that we could do about that. Both cancer and Candida, they feed on sugar. They both grow and reproduce only in a low oxygen environment, the anaerobic environment. They both need an acidic environment to survive. So when you probe cancer cells within the human body, they appear white in color and uneven in texture, just like yeast. This is from Dr. Simoncini. This is what he says. I'll repeat it again. When you probe cancer cells within the human body, they appear white in color and uneven in texture, just like yeast. And yeast is found in 97 to 98% of cancerous tumors in humans. How interesting is that? 2014, there was a research paper done, and the title of it is Candida Albicans and Cancer. Can this yeast induce cancer development or progression? So here's what they found. The most recent findings demonstrate that the C. albicans is capable of promoting cancer by several mechanisms, as described in review: the production of carcinogenic byproducts, triggering of inflammation, induction of the Th17 response, and molecular mimicry. We underline the need not only to control this type of infection during cancer treatment, especially given the major role of this yeast species in nosocomial infections, but also to find new therapeutic approaches to avoid the pro-tumor effect of this fungal species. So it's so important that we look at any of these disease labels that we have been given and start asking the question, why? Why is the body responding this way? What's really going on here? So this really sounds more as a extreme systemic yeast overgrowth. There's some yeast issues. When you have 97 to 98% of something that's yeast, look at many of our labels on some of our foods. I mean, that's pretty well considered pretty much pure, right? Almost pure. I mean, it's basically yeast. So we really need to look at this holistically. So what is it that we can do? Like, we have these different illnesses, these different things, these labels that we've been given. We have these list of symptoms, and okay, could be I've got a yeast problem. What is it I can do? The first thing is to know and understand that Candida has a very high affinity for glucose, especially things like any of these sugars. So the glucose, it's basically sugar. So we have a lot of different sugars. There's glucose, fructose, and sucrose. All of those things that these organisms need that to grow. Additionally, the sugar enables the Candida yeast cells to switch to their more destructive form. So that leads to the faster growing Candida, which also leads to things like that leaky gut and perhaps things such as cancer. Like I said, many researchers for over 100 years has connected Candida with cancer. So the first thing that we think of is, what is it we need to eat? What kind of fuel then should we be putting in our bodies? Diet is the surefire way to improve the conditions in our gut. That's the fuel we're putting in there. That's the nutrients that our microbiome is going to get. So whatever bacteria we have in our gut, they need food as well. They're going to eat what we eat. So taking a probiotic without giving it food is, again, throwing grass seed on a desert, or taking fish. If you're not going to buying some fish, putting them in an empty bowl, they're not going to survive. They have to have the nutrients to survive, to really do their work. For them to support our immune system, to fight that battle for us, they also have to have good foods. So what are some foods that we can eat that's going to really help to support the good bacteria to fight off to starve off the Candida? The non-starchy vegetables, things like artichokes, broccoli, kale. A lot of the non-starchy ones are quite often the ones that we have the most problems eating. We don't really like to eat those. We don't have really good taste buds for those. But what I have found is once we start eating them, we really start to crave them because these are just really have wonderful flavors, and there's so many things you can do with them. So if you're struggling with eating some of these foods here, reach out to me. I have a lot of different recipes. I have a Pinterest page where I have a lot of recipes. My children and I, we transitioned into completely away from like packaged foods and away from a lot of grains and those sort of things about 4 years ago. And it was really rough, especially for the one child who all they liked was bread and pasta and peas. It was just bread and pasta, everything. And so we got on Pinterest and we started looking at things. I started putting in search terms and found some great meals. Now, I mean, with the things that my children eat, they'll eat more things than me. They are amazing cooks. My oldest is 13, is just like an absolutely amazing chef. And they just create these great things with these foods. There's so many great flavors that we can do with these foods once we slowly start using them. So reach out to me if you need suggestions on that. Check out my page with different recipes. I've got a lot of really good recipes on there. The next thing is low sugar fruits. We got to make sure we're especially like the low in the glucose and fructose and sucrose. Non-glutinous grains. Even some of the grains, though, sometimes can be problematic for other reasons. So these are just a general guideline. Please don't take any of the things that I say here. Remember, this is for educational purposes. That if you have Candida, just okay, it's this, this, and this. These are just a general start with. Go with what your body says, how your body responds. Put everything in context. Look at all the pieces to the puzzle. This is just to kind of get you started. Drinks like chicory coffee and herbal teas, healthy proteins like eggs, herring, and salmon. Sometimes the dairy products, kefir and yogurt, can be helpful. low mold nuts and seeds to make sure that they are low mold. And that's pretty much a general across the board. We want low mold. Herbs and spices, especially if you can have like fresh herbs where you've dried yourself, those really just seem to have the best flavor in my opinion. Like whenever you're able to dry, we have some great rosemary and some oregano and some basil, and some of our friends bring over some of their herbs, and oh my goodness, it's just, those just to me are, I just love those. The fermented food, the healthy fats and oils, and then fermented foods, things like kefir, olives, and sauerkraut. Again, the kombucha is kind of like a fermented sort of, that one would not, we would not want the kombucha. Kombucha can really add to different types of yeast overgrowth, so be very careful with that. Which leads to, there's going to be some foods that we should avoid. We should avoid things that are really high in sugars, especially those like in the fructose, bananas, dates, and a lot of fruit juices. The glutinous grains like barley, rye, and wheat. Several different kinds of meats, like definitely the pork and like the lunch meats, but that should pretty much go without saying. Fish and tuna, swordfish are some of the other ones that can be very problematic with Candida, which we hear a lot of different fish. We always encouraged to eat more fish, and so we got to look at things. All these suggestions, please put them into context for your specific situation. Sometimes dairy is something we definitely need to avoid, and for the most part, I advocate avoiding all dairy because dairy is meant for babies and for the babies of whatever animal that milk comes from. So the next thing we have is condiments with added sugar, refined and oiled processed foods, sugars and sugar substitutes, caffeinated or sugary drinks, and alcoholic drinks, which these pretty much kind of also go without saying, but that sugar really feeds the Candida. That's the stuff that it likes. So removing the foods from it is sort of like making a desert for it. So the next thing that the biggest question I get is, okay, what about a cleanse? I'm ready to do a cleanse. Like cleanses are taking off. There's a cleanse for everything nowadays. While I love cleanses and I'm a huge advocate of cleanses, I also am very cautious, and I want to, please, if anything else that you remember here, please remember this, that if you're going to do a cleanse, please make sure that your elimination pathways are working well. Your detox pathways are working well. Otherwise, we get stuck in a situation where we have a clogged toilet that we're trying to use. What's going to happen? It's going to back up even more. The same in our body. We're just going to recirculate these toxins, and that cause an entire nasty mess, and our body's going to suffer from it. So please make sure that your elimination systems are working really, really well first. And if you're not sure how to do that, you definitely need to reach out and find you a health mentor, a health coach, a functional provider that is going to help to educate you and empower you on how to do that. It's just where it's very, very vital. So here's the cleanses that you're going to mostly hear about that's the most successful with yeast. The first one is just doing like a liquid-only cleanse, and this one is basically you're going to make your own vegetable broth, like with some onions, garlic, celery, kale, sea salt, and water. This we make all the time. This really just makes a wonderful broth. It is a base broth for almost any soup, so we do this quite a bit, and especially if you have a Instant Pot, I think it makes the best soup ever. We have been making soups, bone broths, for many years, even before we really completely changed all of our diet and stuff over. And after getting the Instant Pot, I'm like, oh my goodness, none of them compare to what my Instant Pot does. And it's a fraction of the time. So, and it preserves a lot more of the nutrients as well. So anyway, so you just do this basically for a couple days. Like that's all you're going to drink is a lot of the broth and the water throughout the day. And you can repeat that every few weeks, or you can also, many people use it to jumpstart this other option, which is more of an extended option, about a 3 to 5 day period, where you eliminate all the sugars, the fruits, the starches, and alcohol. All those things are eliminated from the diet. And then it's, on top of that, you're going to add things like these bitter greens that are topped up with coconut oil, and apple cider vinegar are almost always recommended. And we'll get to why that coconut oil is one of the biggest ones as to why it's recommended. We're going to talk about that next. Supplements, essential oils, and coconut oil. So antifungal drugs are commonly prescribed for Candida. However, there are so many strains that are becoming resistant to these drugs. And so we really need to be finding natural methods. And I'm more of a natural component, or so I promote natural methods anyway, because those things are going to support our body doing what it needs to do. Our body has this amazing built-in defense system. So we just need to support it, get it the tools it needs, and it can fight that battle. We really don't know that battle going on. We can do a lot of tests and we can get a really pretty good idea, but there's just all the nuances and all the little things that have to go in harmony. Our body knows that. It's an amazing body. And so if we can give it the tools it needs, let it do its job. So that's why I really like the natural methods, because we can tap into that. So coconut oil is like one of the top things that are recommended for the yeast infections, and that really comes down to the caprylic acid. That caprylic acid is a really good antibacterial, and so it's going to help to effectively kill off the harmful bacteria. The next thing we're going to have is like milk thistle, which is another great herb that I really love. And this is a good one to help with the liver. And it's going to support the liver, which goes to that detox and elimination pathways. And it especially helps us to detox from and cleanse from medications or environmental pollutions and heavy metals. So when we get those elimination and detox pathways working, it makes it so much easier to win the battle when we have these different kinds of overgrowths, which ties right into vitamin C. We need vitamin C for so many things. If you've watched my webinars on the neurotransmitters, on autism, and how the vitamin C, well, we're needed for those things to clear out our dopamine. We need the vitamin C to support our detox pathways. Like, we need it just across the board. We need vitamin C. And so that's another that we often hear and see is, okay, the vitamin C is one of those things we make sure that we're getting adequate amounts of that in our diet and supplement if needed. Bentonite clay is another thing that we often see, because this is going to help to draw out the impurities in our body from the things that we're trying to get rid of. And it's also packed with minerals, including things like calcium and magnesium, silica and copper, sodium, iron, potassium. And some of those things, like we mentioned earlier, we see deficiencies in the Candida. So this is a great way to support the nutrients that we need, as well as to help pull things out. The next one we're going to hear, and we hear this probably all the time, is probiotics. And if you've heard me a lot, I'm not a huge fan of just taking a probiotic because of the diagnosis, taking a probiotic because of whatever lab test or whatever symptom, whatever. We need to put it into context. But probiotics, yes, we definitely need the good bacteria to help us fight the battle against Candida. Because if there's nothing there, then guess what? Other things are going to repopulate. So it's kind of this fine thing we have to juggle of getting rid of the bad guys, the overgrowth, and filling up with the good things. And so doing that, and it can be tricky sometimes, but don't just take a probiotic just haphazardly. Is what I'm trying to say, is to make sure you are researching them, taking good quality, and you're taking the ones that your body needs, which is why I'm a pretty big advocate now of a couple different stool tests. I especially like the Genova stool test when it comes to looking at the microbiome, because they have a really good test that's DNA based that will tell us, okay, these are the different types of microbes in your biome. Your bifidobacterium is, the level of that, and it just breaks these things really far down into these different species and families and things. And it's based on the DNA, so they don't have to live. They have to come out alive. And so why that's important and why that's significant is that most of these microbes, they don't live in an aerobic environment. They live in an anaerobic. They live in the unoxygenated. So when it gets to an oxygenated environment, they're not going to thrive. So they're not going to culture out very well. On top of that, most of these they should die by the time they get to the end of the GI tract, because there's a lot of changes that happen pH-wise throughout our GI tract, acidic-wise, so that they shouldn't be alive anyway. We shouldn't be able to culture some of these. So that's why I like the DNA base, because then we're going to be able to, they can die, and we're going to know what's our body dealing with, what's the kind of levels that's going on there. There are some, we don't necessarily know where these are at, but at least it gives us a great idea, kind of generally speaking. So I really like the DNA-based microbiome test. Next is essential oils. Oh my goodness, I love essential oils, and I just did a webinar 2 weeks ago on essential oils. If you missed that, I should have a replay link on my website or on Facebook or in the group. Reach out to me, message me, post a comment on any of my groups or pages, and I will get you a link to that. And I went over a lot of things. I think we kind of went over in that one, and I have a really good guide with that. So if you're new to essential oils, the biggest takeaway for that is you need to dilute. Especially these here that are like these antifungal, antimicrobial type essential oils. They can be very, very strong. They're so powerful. But in general, essential oils, they're going to be very concentrated. We are taking we're distilling out just the oil parts of these plants. They're not from the whole plant. Eating the whole plant can be very, very different than the essential oils, because we're getting other properties in the plant that work all synergistically together. So just be careful with the essential oils. There's some great things in the guide that I have. I have a lot of different blends. I have a lot of different, health situations of, what to use for when, or what are things that help support the body in these situations. Reach out to me if you guys need that. But the big ones for Candida are Clove, Oregano, Myrrh, and even Lavender. Lavender is a really good versatile essential oil. I personally am not a fan of a lavender. I just not, but I've seen it work really well. I've got family members that it works really, really well with. So look at the things that work for you. So just because an essential oil is suggested or is, supports certain things, the body for certain things, you may have a reaction to it. It may not work for you. So that's, not that essential oil doesn't work, it just doesn't work for you. So that's why it's so important. All these things that we do, we look naturally, and we're approaching health naturally to do it holistically. And then it goes back to the dilution. Make sure we are diluting. So the dilution, not only does it, save us not having to use as much oil, but it improves the absorption of our body, of that oil. So we're going to get more bang for our buck by diluting it than if we just use it straight. It makes it much more easier whenever we have a carrier oil. And with that, I will say real quick here, one of my favorite carrier oils is the MCT, the medium chain triglycerides, or the fractionated coconut oil. That's going to be like your coconut oil that's liquid. That's one of my favorite carrier oils. If you're new to essential oils, the carrier oils would like you to dilute them with. So anyway, I'll stop on that. But there's some great things with different essential oils. And those oils are your top antifungals to use for in a situation if you had Candida. So next one is, choosing that right probiotic. And I kind of touched on this about, the probiotics, they really help us to fight the battle because they help to rebalance the GI tract, rebalance our gut, and they help to inhibit the growth. But we have to make sure that we have everything in place. For the most part, we're going to look at for probiotics, you're going to want one that's going to have a really high amount of the higher strength, so to speak, or the higher count in that the bacteria. Soil-based probiotics are usually recommended. They generally are thought to be more, have a higher, more resilient and have a higher survival rate, but they're not really for everybody. So I have mixed feelings on the soil-based probiotics. The two other strains really to look for are the Lactobacillus acidophilus and the Bifidobacterium bifidum. Especially the Bifidobacterium, for the most part, I've seen clinically is that many people, so I think I've only had one person who wasn't completely deficient in the Bifidobacteria. And that a lot of it goes back to our lifestyle and our diet here in the U.S. Those two strains have been very well researched that show that they help to support and enhance the immune function, especially when we're talking about a Candida type overgrowth. So with all of those things that we just mentioned, things you can use, please make sure that you are putting these things holistically and don't just take that, we're going to take this because I have Candida, I'm going to take this for that. I do not really support that. So there's 5 steps to natural treatment. And we've really got to look at all these things, look at the big picture, and decide where does my body need help at. So the first thing that we need to do is step 1 is we need to remove the sources. We have to get rid of what's causing this, what's fueling this yeast overgrowth. And then the next thing is we got to really support the detox, that elimination. So we got to look at these two things, and these really all work kind of hand in hand. And it's not really like one thing starts with another. If we're going to start anywhere, it would be to the center here. But basically all of these kind of things together, except for the one thing we're going to do last. So the support of the detox, we have to make sure those detox pathways are working well. We don't ever want to start anything unless we have those things working well. And then we have to also kill off the overgrowth. We have to get rid of whatever extra bacteria is there. And then we have to repopulate with the good bacteria. But all of this hinges on having appropriate amount of sleep, adequate sleep, and really good stress management. So if we are not honing in on whatever the stressors are in our life, we're not going to be able to maximize on the great opportunities that we have naturally by removing the things, by supporting detox, by killing off the overgrowth and repopulating, because we don't have the stress under control. So all of those things kind of work harmoniously. The repopulation is generally towards the end, and supporting detox is usually right there at the beginning. You've got to have your sleep and stress under control, your detox pathways working, then you can kind of start on those other things. But there's going to be a juggling act on doing all of that. So with that, I've got a guide for you guys. So you should get a link to this, and if not, reach out to me and message me. You could also go to thefunctionalperspective.com/C as in Candida, AND 101 resources. So that's C as in Candida, A, N as in Nancy, D as in David, 101 resources, and you will get this quick reference guide with Candida. So in that reference guide, I have this 5-minute symptom check questionnaire. So it's a 3-page questionnaire that goes over a lot of different symptoms associated with Candida, and then you get a score at the end to kind of see, okay, where do I fall in the range here? You know, is it something that's really probably not an issue, or you know what, it's most certainly more than likely I've got a serious Candida situation going on here. There's also a food list to say, hey, here's some of the foods to eat, to not eat. And then I have a daily lifestyle, food and lifestyle journal for you to kind of track, okay, the fuels that I'm eating, and what is my stress like? What is my support like? What is my emotional stressors? What's my job? Am I getting enough sleep? What's my activity like? Is it too much, too little? My spiritual health, my emotional health, my mental health, all of those things are things that we need to look at the big picture. And so this kind of helps just to kind of get you a quick start, kick started on that. There's usually so much more that we need to do and to look into, but these are some tools to kind of help get you guys on that path. If you guys are needing help and you need to learn more, you want to know more about, okay, this natural healing, how can we restore our body naturally? You can visit my website at thefunctionalperspective.com, and I also offer complimentary discovery consultations. It's about 30-45 minutes, and we can get on the phone and go over some of your top pressing health issues and give you a few strategies to get you moving forward. And of course, I have this great moms group called Moms Taking Charge of Digestive Health, and this is not just for moms, it's for pretty much any woman. It is only open to women at this time. I do have another group that's open to, I think, men as well. Not quite as active in, but you can also search that one out and find me. But Moms Taking Charge of Digestive Health, that you're totally welcome to join. And it's basically for anyone who's looking to say, hey, I want to take charge of my health. And most all of our health issues start in the gut. So we got to start in our GI first. So you all are welcome for that. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I do have a lot of webinars that I've done in the past. Like I mentioned earlier, like the essential oil ones, I had the functional autism awareness. This one really gets a lot into our neurotransmitters, into like things like the MTHFR, into those detox pathways. If you want to know a little bit more about detox, the functional autism awareness is a great webinar to start on that. I need to do one specifically on detox, which I haven't done yet. It's on my list to do, but this one really covers a lot. So if you have like the symptoms like the ADHD, or you have anxiety, depression, any of those kinds of things, check out the autism. I think you'll really find that one very, very helpful. I get into a lot of different things on that, on the neurotransmitters and how those things work and what we can do to support them, what supplements to take, or not necessarily what supplements to take, but the most common supplements that are recommended and whether or not you should take them or not. Like they help you to really determine, to make an educated decision on, hey, you know what, is melatonin something that I should really be taking or not? There's a lot of other ones that I get into. So that's a great webinar. The other one I just did a couple weeks ago was the Essential Oils 101. And we covered a ton of things in that one. Went from dilution, from so if you're a starter in essential oils, if you're new to essential oils, this is definitely the webinar for you. If you're not, if you're experienced in essential oils, this is still a great webinar for you. There's a lot of great tips I have in here. There's like a lot of great recipes that I have in here. I have a list. There's a guide that comes with this, about a 12-page guide that has different combinations for, you know, I have anxiety. What are some oils that's going to help my body support it in resolving the anxiety and help getting my body back on track, or there's a whole list of these different things. So that's another great one. And then I have coming up is combating autoimmunity naturally. I don't have the dates down for this one yet, but it's going to be coming out soon. I've got it almost all finished here, as well as taking the toxic out of cleaning is another one that I have in the works. Again, almost finished, not sure on the dates on that. I should probably just put a date in because it would get me to get it done quicker, but I don't have the date on that one yet. So but those are coming up, and if you have any topics that you would like for me to speak on, or you would like more information on, then reach out to me. You're welcome to message me either in the group or email me, and I have many more. I have a lot of topics that I've started on. I've kind of, started some lists that maybe I can bump it up for you, or I may have a past, but I have other past webinars. I've got quite a bit of other webinars that I've done that you can look on my website and find those as well. I think that I should have a page on there. I need to get that link for you guys, so you can just go to the one page and find all the past webinars for that. But anyway, that was pretty much what I have today. If you guys have any questions, you are welcome to reach out to me. And remember to go get your guide at the page that was. I don't remember now what the page was. Oh, the CAND 101 resources, the functional perspective, CAND, C-A-N-D, 101 resources. And it's about, I think, a 10-page, 8 or 10-page guide. And otherwise, I will see you guys all next time. You all have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. Take care.